It's been hell on earth for many parts of California, with wildfires ravaging an entire community, killing nearly 80 people, hundreds more still missing. Is there anything to be done to stop these monstrous events from breaking out? Glenn McGillivray is the managing director for the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction, and he joins us now. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
These kinds of fires we've been watching in British Columbia the last couple of years, and now increasingly in California. Is this the face of climate change?
Well, this is certainly what is projected to occur under a warming climate. We've been warned about this for quite some time. There's a pretty direct link between climate change and wildfire. And of course, as we say, you can never really point to one single event, but the trend is certainly towards a pretty dire future when it comes to wildfire.
Now, we've had this kind of incident before. British Columbia, as we mentioned, last couple of years, back in 2003, wildfires that are super destructive seem to be the norm now in California. And I harken back to the wildfire that destroyed much of Fort McMurray. Have we not learned from these past destructive wildfires?
It almost appears that we haven't. We kind of know what to do in the face of this thing. We know that we have to, for example, build homes differently. We know we have to design communities differently. We know we have to manage fuel around these places differently. And there's some examples of some action being taken, but we certainly aren't taking the wholesale actions that need to happen to prevent this damage from occurring.
And I think that's the point of our talk today. You authored a piece not too long ago saying we're going to have to start fighting these fires in a different way, and maybe talk to urban firefighters. And you referenced changing the way we build and where we build, and presumably over the long haul, that's the answer, or at least part of it.
It's part of it. It certainly is. I mean, how we build, where and what we build are very, very important. And the science is there. There's been a lot of research coming out of the United States there for a while, out of Canada, out of groups like ICLR. And we do know what needs to be done in many respects, and we just have to get down to doing it. And, we kind of look at these things and go, oh, it's just nature, and we wring our hands, but it's not nature. Fire burning a community is not a natural thing. It's a man-made thing, and we can take measures to prevent it from happening.
Yeah, there's a real misconception out there that these fires grow to this enormous size, and then this wall of flame just moves forward and destroys communities like Paradise in California. But that's not the way the fire actually works.
No, it isn't. What really happens is that embers get blown far ahead of the fire front, and when the embers land on something flammable and get it going, it will cause a chain reaction that can lead to a house igniting or a structure. And once a few of those get going, you get building to building spread, and then you get a conflagration, and that's what happens. And so basically, if you can prevent the embers from igniting, you have a very good chance of saving a structure and saving a neighborhood.
Yeah, and that's part of the puzzle, I gather. If you look at images of the aftermath of the fire, you see tons of homes destroyed, and yet in the middle there will be 2 or 3 that haven't been touched. And same thing with trees. There's this devastated landscape, but in places there are trees that have not been touched. How does that happen?
Yeah, it's exactly this ember thing that I'm telling you about. And those trees that are intact right next to burnt-out structures, that's a telling sign that wall of flame did not come through. It's just the structure was ignited by embers. So what generally happens is the embers land on something like a wooden deck, or maybe a wood pile beside the home, or maybe there's some flammable shrubbery around the home or something like that. That gets burning. It'll set something else on fire, like a wood fence or a wood shed or something like that, and that in turn will cause the house to catch fire. And then the neighbor's house will go because of that, and then a chain reaction occurs. And so, we have seen, as you mentioned, houses in Fort McMurray that were perfect in the middle of neighborhoods that were completely devastated. And the reason why they were perfect is there was nothing immediately around the home to ignite.
Fire breaks, the governments have been calling, and others have been calling for fire breaks around communities. That in itself is not enough. And I note the U.S. president was ridiculed for suggesting you have to sort of thin the forests and rake up all of the fuels on the ground. Is he being overly simplistic there, or is the criticism valid that he received, or is he onto something?
No, it's completely oversimplistic, very facile. Thinning forests it's much more complex than just cleaning up the forest floor, and I really don't know how anybody would suggest that you do that when you're looking at hundreds of thousands of hectares surrounding a community. It is more complicated than that. It's about land management in general, and that means not only just managing flammable fuels, but how we use land, where we develop, how we develop, how we build things, and how we manage unnatural fuels. So all these things I'm telling you about, whether you have your wood pile right against your house, or your propane tank, or flammable shrubs right up against the home, whether you have used pine mulch or bark mulch and things of that nature. It's the big picture, and just saying that, if you rake the floor of the forest, you'll be okay. It's extremely oversimplistic, and it doesn't help anybody.
It's almost reached the point where you might want to consider having sprinkler systems on the rooftops of homes to be mandatory. That might help stop this kind of a thing.
Well, I think exterior sprinkler systems are very, very useful. They are used by wildfire fighting and urban fire fighters that that are in communities that abut the forest. They are very, very helpful, and there's a way of building temporary sprinklers. You can look it up on the internet that you can kind of place on your roof just prior to the fire. A whole range of things that you can do, and it's really just a matter of kind of sitting down and maybe getting on the internet, maybe even going to our website. That we have a booklet on how to prevent this from happening. What we're really talking about, though, is fire smarting your property, and Fire Smart is the premier program of its kind in the country to educate people about how they can protect their properties, their neighborhoods, their whole communities. I mean, Fire Smart is where it's at. It is the best program of its kind in the country. It's badly underfunded, and it needs some more money. And it's not expensive, usually, to fire smart a property. Often it's just getting that knowledge and getting the work and keeping your property neat and tidy and getting all those flammable things immediately away from the structure. And, if you live in the middle of Toronto, this is not an issue, but if you live up against the boreal forest, you really, really have to be aware of those things that you can do to protect your family and your property. Some
saw a story the other day that some blame governments for actually compounding the threat because they eradicate the kinds of trees that might act as a buffer that are not quite as flammable as the trees that are going up.
Yeah, I've seen that recently. It's not an area that I have expertise in. But I think if the experts are concerned about it, that we should then take another look at it. But it's not something I'm really overly familiar with.
Last year's wildfires in California alone caused some $14 billion in damage. I'm presuming that number will be duplicated or be advanced quite considerably this year. Just wondering, that affects all of us in the end because of higher insurance costs?
Well, I mean, it shouldn't. Those are problems in California. A lot of that are going to be picked up. A lot of the costs will be picked up by the global reinsurance market. We're lucky right now that the insurance industry is in a very competitive state right now and has access to capital. I think we should be okay. Californians in high-risk areas, it might be a different story, just because these things are happening time and time and time again. But I think in Canada we'll be reasonably okay.
Bottom line then is we're not helpless. We just have to figure out what to do and then get on with doing it. And your website probably has some very, very interesting material to look at.
Absolutely. Come to our website. Also go to FireSmart. FireSmart is the program. Great deal of information there, whether you're a homeowner or a business owner or a local politician or a firefighter, it's not just about the individual properties, it's also about the neighborhood and the broader landscape. So FireSmart has all that great information there as well.
Well, there are lessons to be learned from these massive wildfires. Glenn McGillivray is the Managing Director for the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.